Couple of days, soaring at one point yesterday to levels not seen since the start of Russia's war with Ukraine. After the president's comments late yesterday, oil prices fell again.
Oil traders seemed reassured by President Trump saying the war in Iran is going to be ended very soon.
I do think as of right now, it's a temporary blip.
Holly Newman-Croft is the managing director of the investment management firm Neuberger Berman. She says as long as there is supply, the price should come down.
He assured the world that the oil and energy supply through the Strait of Hormuz would flow freely.
Trump left open the possibility of an escalation in fighting if global oil supplies are disrupted by the Islamic Republic. Jesse Mitchell, CBS News.
President Trump is not yet apologizing for a strike on a girls' school in Iran. He had this exchange with a reporter yesterday.
Mr. President, you just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation. But tomahawks are used by others, as you know. Numerous other nations have tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report.
The attack killed dozens of children and their teachers. While the Tomahawk is sold to allied countries like Japan and Australia, there's no evidence to suggest that Iran has gotten its hands on the cruise missile.
Australia is granting asylum to 5 members of the Iranian women's soccer team who were in the country for a tournament when the Iran war began. An official team list shows 26 players, plus coaches and other staff. It's unclear what threats the players faced in Iran. The decision by Australian officials followed days of urging by Iranian groups in Australia and by the President Trump for the Australian government to help those women who had not spoken publicly about a wish to claim asylum. That team drew speculation and news coverage in Australia after players were seen not singing the Iranian national anthem before their first match.
Now to the top stories we're working on at WTOP.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth telling reporters this morning Iran will see another intense day of bombing from the U.S. and Israel.
It comes after President Trump offers conflicting assessments on how long the war in Iran might last.
And still more legal trouble for a Capitol rioter accused of causing issues on the metro.
Full details on these stories in the minutes ahead.
Brought to you by Commuter Connections. Feeling ill at work? Commuter Connections offers a free guaranteed ride home if you or your child gets sick.
Why don't we get started? This is not a committee hearing. It's going to be very informal. So at some point, if anybody wants to say something, just turn your thing up like that. And I'll make a couple remarks just to start. I had the privilege of, which I wish everybody in the world did, of being an LSU fan growing up. And of course, any school would tell you that their school is more than that particular school. It's like a community. People love college athletics. They really do. And it's a way to bond with people that just exceeds. I was given a list of schools. My staff director is from Notre Dame, so of course he listed Notre Dame as the first school. You know what I'm saying? Just again, you're always trying to kind of put your school up front a little bit. Tuberville, I think, was an Ole Miss coach at some point, and a Texas Tech coach. I'm not sure where he ended up. But the point being, we all feel an incredible sense of pride for our schools. So this man, Collis Temple, was the one I had a conversation with about a year ago. And he said that he would tell these young players that you come to LSU, keep your nose clean, spend 4 years here. At the end of it, the school will take care of you. Most of you won't play pro sports, but the community, the school, the state will take care of you. But with the current chaos of NIL, that is not the case. If, again, recalling the conversation, that if the student athlete transfers every year, there's no loyalty between the university and the student or the student and the university, that he or she will finish. Most will not play pro athletics. And instead of having a launching pad into success in a community, they will take a job for which they've been poorly trained. I spoke to a football coach about this, Nick Saban. He goes, he had an athlete that transferred to another school. The athlete needed 17 more hours to finish at Alabama, but he transferred to another school and lost credits so that now he had to get 58 more hours to graduate, and most likely wouldn't graduate. So you can see how the current system is actually hurting the student athlete. So our effort will be, what do we do to protect the student athlete? And in turn, we'll protect the universities. But if we take our primary variable, protecting the student athletes, then I think others will do well as well. Now, it's time for Congress to be involved. There is a court decision, we're aware of it. But Congress needs to be involved too. Title IX was not addressed in the court decision. So there needs to be some legislative action looking at Title IX and its impact. Again, Coach Tuberville is here, and Coach Tuberville is going to know this better than anybody. One, he has legislation, but two, he's lived it. But each of you are here because of your expertise. So the question is, how do we set the student up for success? And that's what we'll focus on. There's a wide variety of perspectives here. And so just to kind of quickly go through, Collis Temple, whom I've already referenced, a legend in Louisiana, the first African-American who got a athletic scholarship to LSU, very successful businessman, two athletes who played at LSU. He's been a mentor to athletes at LSU since he played, finishing up, I think, around 1971.
74, finishing up in 74.
LSU Deputy Athletic Director Julie Cromer is here. When I spoke to the athletic director, he just was full of praise for Julie, given the perspective of them. And then the other panelists will introduce as we get started. Jim Carr, who is the president and CEO of the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics. He sits on several college sports-focused boards, including the National Association of Collegiate Sports and USA Basketball. He got his bachelor's from Millsaps and his master's of science in sports management from the University of Massachusetts. And he'll obviously represent the small college perspective. Emily Searcy, a former Division I tennis player and current development officer for Samford Athletics. She'll be introduced by Coach Tuberville. She had a 3.85 while transferring twice and still graduating in 4 years. and graduated from Sanford in 2025. Thank you. Bernie Dennis, who's a principal at Jackson Lewis. He's an employment and sports law expert and has written extensively on the state of college athletics, earning his bachelor's degree at Catholic University of America and a law degree from Villanova University School of Law. And I think he's Catholic, but I'm not positive on that. Thank you, Mr. Dennis. And of course, that brings us to the next issue. What is the status of these athletes? Some would have them considered as employees. The universities will say that would be fraught with lots of problems. But I think, is it the West Coast, the Pac-10, or California that has made that a possibility?
Yes, sir. I mean, I think all of this mostly began with the NIL restrictions that started in California with the state barring any restrictions to athletes being able to market their NIL rights, which the NCAA up to then had done. And then I think it was a total of 28 other states. It was a legislative arms race, so to speak, to allow them to relax restrictions. And there were different variables. And I know the NCAA has come up the steps of Congress several times to look for a standard that can be nationwide rather than this piecemeal process there. And so I think California and other larger states are looking for the next competitive avenue to protect students, but also to get a competitive edge with their programs as well.
Got it. And then I'll introduce Julie Cromer just a little bit more fully. She's Executive Deputy Athletic Director and Chief Operating Officer for LSU Athletics, joining LSU in 2025 after being Director of Athletics at Ohio University, and oversees daily operations of the athletic department, supervising all 21 varsity programs. She earned her master's in public administration from the University of Indiana and her bachelor's from Missouri State. So let me start off just with some questions to prime the pump, and then I'll ask Coach Tuberville, and then I'll just have a free-flowing discussion. Mr. Dennis, what would be the consequence of allowing athletes, either all athletes or those in revenue-producing sports, the ability to be an employee, or giving them the employee status?
Thank you, Chairman. If you classify the students as employees, they then become subject to several statutory schemes, not the least of which would be the FLSA, which would allow them to be compensated for their work time, for overtime, and then it becomes a challenge in what constitutes that, right? Under the law, it would be anything that is required for their work, right? And so when you have rules like eligibility rules about maintaining a certain GPA, things like that, it becomes not only your time on the field, but does going to class become compensable work time, right? How do you track that? Does going to study hall? Does meeting with your classmates to prepare for your classroom work? Yes. Certainly, there are in professional sports, some of these compensation models are largely a construct of the collective bargaining agreements, but there have been statutory elements to set standards as well when there's not collective bargaining in place. Not 10 years ago, Congress passed the Save America Pastimes Act, which set a baseline salary for minor league players who at that time hadn't unionized, and it allowed, it set a baseline of the minimum wage during the season to allow them to be compensated at higher levels than Major League Baseball is compensating their minor leaguers at the time.
So again, correct?
Absolutely. I think there are past precedents that it's just a matter of scaling it to the question that we're trying to answer for. And I think the Save America Pastimes Act can be one example of that to be implemented. And yes, the SAPA only specifically under the law only applied to the in-season compensation. And so you had different levels that competed for a different number of games, and it also allowed for compensation outside of the season, but there were restrictions, and specifically in the statute.
Okay. Coach, I think I was supposed to allow you to introduce Ms. Cersei. I apologize for not doing so, but you're the one who brings all the expertise here. Let me just turn things over to you for a bit.
Well, let's start out by introducing Ms. Cersei here. Sanford Bulldog, Birmingham, Alabama. Ms. Cersei is a successful former Division I player, making stops at Arkansas State, Mississippi State University, finished her collegiate career at Sanford University in Birmingham. She graduated from Sanford in 2025, moving on to become the director of Sanford's Bulldog Club. Ms. Cersei has firsthand experience of navigating the NIL world and a non-Power 4 school and using the transfer portal herself. She can speak to how important Title IX is for college athletics and how to rein in the transfer portal, which is one of our biggest problems, and how classifying student athletes as an employee would be a nightmare. I totally agree with that. The landscape of college athletics is at a very dangerous point right now. Hope today we can provide some insights and conversations. So I would love for Ms. Cersei to say a few words as we get started here. We can have a conversation, but kind of give her point of view from her standpoint from women's athletics and Title IX.
And you're right, I kind of launched into questions, but everybody probably has a statement, so let me just start with Cersei and then we'll kind of.
Absolutely, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity today to speak from someone who not only played at 3 different conferences, 3 different levels, but is a non-revenue Olympic sport and a female athlete. So these issues are very close to not only my heart, but those who also played in the capacity that I did. I think that college athletics is threatened by NIL to the point that it has moved into revenue sharing, and the transfer portal does not complement that. I want to preserve the opportunities for student athletes who want to approach college athletics that way, but for the majority, as you mentioned, that is just threatening the integrity of college athletics right now when it comes to an education. And yeah, thank you.
Julie, would you like to have any comments?
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and to represent LSU, but also to represent an enterprise that I've been part of for almost 30 years. You mentioned my tenure at LSU began last year. Prior to that, I spent 6 years as athletics director at Ohio University, which finds itself in what we affectionately refer to as the group of 6, meaning the conferences who do play football bowl games, but are not necessarily often considered in policy and legal cases that primarily have been driven by issues at what we call the Power 4 level. I'm delighted to see such a diverse panel here. Senator, thank you, and thank you for also including the opinions and perspectives of someone who has most recently had experience within our enterprise, as well as our colleagues in the NAIA. Oftentimes we talk about NCAA, but there actually is a whole universe of teams and colleges who are providing opportunities at a variety of levels, and we have to work to protect them as well. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to talking not only about the employment opportunities, but also the potential impact on our women's and Olympic sports based on the trajectory of college sports now, and I know we'll have a great opportunity to do that. Thank you.
I just appreciate being here. From my experience, I represent institutions as they're going through the implications of a lot of what's going on, from the House settlement, from the NIL changes to the new CSC, and whether institutions will abide by their rules. And a lot of this is coming down, as the chairman mentioned, that some of it is what are the implications of Title IX, and we're seeing institutions trying to make decisions to save their entire programs and then be facing lawsuits on the impact that Title IX is having on those as well. And so this is a great opportunity to really try and solve for something that can help everyone advance going forward. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
First off, I'd like to say I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to come and sit before this body and engage in this historic conversation. Being a student athlete at a time that was really, really significant in the lifeblood of this country, I'd just like to share a thought, and that is, when you talk about student athletes, you're talking about individuals who are revered and appreciated, and who set a standard of leadership that's so important to the fabric of this country. Everyone loves the Olympic process in this country. It brings us all together in so many ways. It represents so many different things that are significant to the lifeblood of our country. And so when you talk about athletes, athletics, and you put that brand of student athlete on an individual, you're talking about leadership, and you're talking about things that are really critically important to the lifeblood of where we are and how we exist as Americans. And so I bring a perspective that's really important, and that is identifying individuals who are rural individuals and folk who are the boots on the grounds type people who need this path forward athletically so they can become full-fledged citizens, assets to themselves, assets to the community, and carry things forward. And this is really important in rural spaces in America, because there's so much at stake as we endeavor to take this on and find a path to secure. And I know it's going to be a challenge to put this toothpaste back in the toothpaste package, but we have to make sure that this is done. And at this level, this is where it needs to be put in place. So I'm elated to be here. I hope we can accomplish some things that are going to be productive for this body. And I appreciate being invited. Appreciate being invited.
Yeah, good morning. Like the rest of the panel, I appreciate being here, and specifically in the role of being able to represent smaller colleges and universities. For those who may not be familiar with the NAI, National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, we have approximately 250 institutions, average enrollment of about 2,000, so fairly small institutions compared to places like LSU. But we represent 87,000 student athletes, and 80% of our schools are private, about 65% faith-based, and maybe the most important thing for this particular discussion is at an average NAI institution, 36% of the students are also athletes. So the implications of student athletes becoming employees, or a lot of these court decisions that are making it difficult to enforce our rules around what we call education-based athletics is really, I don't think it's an overstatement or being too dramatic to say, critical to the not only the NAI, but each of our institutions being able to stay in business on a long-term basis. So, but real quickly, I've been at the NAI 27 years and was a Division III student athlete, worked at a couple of Division I schools, so hopefully bring a perspective that is fairly well-rounded.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate everybody being here today. I come from a family of, I guess, above average athletes. I played football in college, coached there. My wife ran track in college at Ohio University. My daughter is playing golf at Ohio University right now. And so I feel for what colleges are going through with the convergence of a variety of things. You got betting that's going on right now that's impacting the game. You got NIL going on. You got the transfer portal. Those two together, I think, have led to the wild, wild west of college athletics. All of that happening at once. I am not as concerned about what happens to the big time programs with basketball and football. I care about what happens to the rest of college athletes. Because you know why we created athletic events connected to schools? It's because educators in the late 19th century said physical fitness and character development are important for our society, and we want to have sports connected with our schools to teach those tools. And there's a lot of student athletes out there who are not playing in March Madness or at bowl games, but they are developing character. And many of them go on to lead our institutions, our schools, our businesses, our communities, and they need that opportunity. And so the reason to care about this, I think, for all of us is to protect them and to protect those opportunities. And I do, and I am concerned about Title IX in the sense that resources can be drained away again like they were before, but also the number of non-American citizens, particularly in tennis, that are taking up scholarship opportunities for American athletes. Because not everybody has a private tennis coach or a golf coach or a whatever that they have. Some people come from backgrounds where they can't afford those things. And if they have abilities and if they had the opportunity, could become an elite athlete if given those opportunities. But when those opportunities are being taken away by people that go to golf schools in other nations and tennis camps in other nations, and they're basically taking up scholarships, I just concerned, and if I could, Mr. Chairman, because I can't stay long, I would like to ask Emily your thoughts on that being one of the sports where a lot of those opportunities are being taken away.
Yeah, I appreciate your concern for that, and I would say some of my best teammates have been international, and the other side of that discussion would be, as an American women's tennis player through college, I am more well-rounded because of the culture and because of the exposure that I've had to other international students. In our space, I think that it's only going to get more competitive as more families want to raise their children in an athletics environment. I don't necessarily feel like my scholarship opportunities are threatened by internationals, and that it is a discussion, though, that I would like to hear from other tennis players and especially male tennis players, because that space is even larger for that. But I would say that over the past 4 years, it was more competitive, but it made me work harder. I knew the competition was real.
Competition's good. It's great. I just concerned that for many reasons these opportunities are going away. And if I could, Julie, I want to ask you to draw on your experience at a place like Ohio University and how this has impacted those Division I schools that don't have those kinds of resources and don't play at the highest levels.
I appreciate the question. Athens was a really special chapter in my career, and I hope she's enjoying her time both on the golf course and also on Court Street, as I know you will appreciate. I will tell you that most of the coverage of the issues in our industry is focused on programs and departments like where I am now at LSU. But the reality is, the much broader shared experience is one of students on campuses like Ohio University and Stanford and the NAIA schools that are represented here today. The financial dynamics are real. It's not a Title IX issue, it's a financial issue. There are increasing costs that are causing leaders of departments to make difficult conversations or difficult decisions. And I think it cannot be ignored. I do think that if we continue down this path, we will be increasingly stressed at what we would call a mid-major or low major or Division II or Division III or NAIA level to meet the needs of our student athletes to the levels we've been able to accomplish under Title IX to this point. I'm very concerned about that. And so it may or may not be that opportunities go away. The federal legislation actually protects opportunities, it protects scholarships, but the activities around those experiences, I think, are in jeopardy because of the financial realities of the model that we're barreling toward.
Will you elaborate on the activities around? I didn't quite follow that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there are leadership opportunities, how far you travel to seek competition, the various levels that you have in order to be able to pursue in a sport like golf or tennis, other individual competitive opportunities. That is to say, maybe in some of these situations, you're only traveling by bus, you're not traveling by flight. And these may seem like first world problems, but for young people who are trying to prepare themselves for larger experiences down the road, they are important. Those activities are important. So again, I think Title IX will give us an opportunity to protect the opportunities specifically in the slots, but the quality of the experience, Senator, is one that I will keep my eye on.
Chairman, thank you. I know I've got to head out, but I will say this is also going on at a time when higher education in general is facing the stress of demographic issues, costs, all other things. And so, the context of what's going on in higher education as it relates to sports with all of those things happening at once certainly are worthy of our time. And I appreciate you taking, Mr. Chairman, the effort to host this conversation today.
Thank you very much for putting this together. Looking forward to the hearing next week. I come from this from maybe a little bit different perspective. I think the benefit of this wild, wild west NIL era is that we are seeing how valuable these high-performing athletes are, especially in the revenue-producing sports. And I'm not somebody who sheds a tear over the fact that for the first time ever, these athletes are finally making something close to what they are worth. We don't actually have any other industry in this country where we have discussions about trying to limit the rightful just compensation that a high-performing athlete, performer, or worker makes. And yet that seems to be the conversation we're having here, that these athletes, again, in the revenue-producing sports, are making too much money. So, to me, I think we are seeing what has essentially been an unconscionable exploitative effort to try to artificially limit the compensation that many of these athletes deserve in the name of preserving massive profits and returns for a whole bunch of adults who have loved the fact that they have been able to get rich, from coaches to apparel executives to people in the media, off of an artificial suppression of wages, largely of basketball players and football players, but many female athletes as well, through collusion. And so, to me, I acknowledge that the system we have today doesn't make any sense, that the way that we're compensating athletes right now in a just weirdly
in a very strange way in which there's no transparency, there's no ethical boundaries, doesn't make sense. But I don't have any interest in stuffing this back in the bottle. I want athletes to be able to make what they deserve, just like I think an electrician or an actor or a painter should make what they deserve as well. So that's why, I've suggested taking a look at collective bargaining, letting the athletes speak for themselves, right? Saying that we shouldn't micromanage as Congress the relationship between college athletes and colleges. We should just empower the colleges or the conferences and the athletes to have a conversation between themselves. I think that is probably the cleanest, best idea moving forward. But I'm grateful that this committee is tackling the issue. I just, I'm not interested in something that goes back to an era in which we were suppressing the wages of individuals who we are seeing now provide an incredibly valuable service. And by the way, are mostly young Black athletes. This is a civil rights issue. The adults that are making millions are largely white. The athletes that are having their wages or have had their wages suppressed to the greatest degree have largely been Black. And just another, and I'm going to ask Bernie a question on some of the legal questions that we'll have to tackle. One of the ways to sort of help settle this question of wage suppression is to just, let everybody go pro. I mean, what is most egregious in football is that there is absolute collusion in that these kids are forced essentially to play college football because it's great for the colleges. Even though they're doing brain damage to themselves, they're sustaining injuries, and undoubtedly they could be making money in the pros. You see how quickly these athletes transition and are stars immediately. Same thing for basketball. It's a little less egregious because it's only 1 year of essentially forced college play. But you could probably solve a lot of these issues if you just really opened up the market and said to the NFL and the NBA, you just can't force these kids to wait. If they're ready to play, you got to let them play. Bernie, talk a little bit about, maybe your thoughts on collective bargaining. I don't maybe mean conventional collective bargaining, but a players' association. And then where do you think the Supreme Court is headed here? Because it seems to me that the reason the colleges and the conferences are coming to us is because they know the Supreme Court is about to strike down the collusion, that the Supreme Court has signaled that they know this is a scam, and that if this just continues to move through the courts from the House settlement onward, that players are going to be able to make what they should make. So those two questions.
Sure, thank you, Senator. On the collective bargaining front, I think it boils down to, I think it's a very noble idea. But as you said, there's the revenue generators and the haves and have-nots across the sports. And so it becomes a matter of what is the bargaining unit, right? Is it all athletes? Is it the revenue generators? And then ultimately, the negotiation of those rights on the terms and conditions of employment, right? I think there are disparities even if you had a bargaining unit of football, so to speak. I think the seniors, the people aging out of the system, this is unlike any other bargaining unit you would see where you're only supposed to be there for a limited period of time. It's supposed to be a transition, like Coach Saban said last week. The seniors have an interest in bargaining over eligibility and continuing to stay, whereas the freshmen have an interest in bargaining over opportunities that are then being taken away
But that's
from
the
them.
same. But that's the same thing in a professional players union. The senior players always have different interests than the rookies do. So that's not actually unique, right?
Well, I would say
I know there's some. I know that there's some exceptional circumstances, but in every collective bargaining arrangement, there are complicated dynamics inside the bargaining unit.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think having been a minor league player at a time before they were unionized and having to live by the stringents that were bargained for us by the Major League Players Union, I'm very aware that there are terms and conditions that go through it. But I think I only bring it up to raise the issue that it is not a clean system. And I think my concern in looking at even if you have the revenue generating sports unionize and come to agreements on their employment, it's the resources that are then agreed upon and put into those sports that are taken away from the non-revenue generators, right? I think right now there are a very few number of institutions that turn a profit with their sports program, right? These big revenue generators fund everything else. And so the more resources that are taken to put into that arms race or that even the collectively bargained issues is what impact does that have on the back end, right? The unions, the organizing bodies are they're not going to all jump to represent, the tennis team or the golf team right away. They're going to want to they're going to want to negotiate and represent the revenue generators first. And it's kind of the trickle down effect of what is left after that I think raises an issue.
How about the Supreme Court?
The Supreme Court, obviously,
Or
I
courts
think,
in general?
Yeah, sure. I think that really goes to the antitrust component of this and whether protection should be there. And like I brought up with the Save America Pastimes Act, looking to baseball, again, there's been a 100-year history of an antitrust exemption for baseball that could possibly be legislated to apply to scale to the NCAA. But if absent the ability for these institutions to talk, and really the antitrust issue comes to enforcement of rules, right? Right now we're seeing not just an inability to control the payments to athletes, but even just define what amateurism is, how long can people stay, and the going pro component. The issue you raised on that, I think Maurice Claret would have loved to talk to you a few years ago, right? Because these athletes are artificially barred, and some of these other professional institutions have relied on the NCAA as a proving ground that other organizations have not. And so I absolutely think that would be an issue. But I think the Supreme Court resoundingly said in Alston that the system is broken and we're willing to entertain other challenges to it. And I think that is what has prompted discussions like this to occur in how do we bring some sanity to the situation.
Great, thanks.
So members.
Can I just say something real quickly? Just to say, this committee does not have jurisdiction over what athletes are paid. Not directly. And so we're here within the jurisdiction of health, education, labor, and pension would be the labor status, which would be the education, which includes Title IX, and potentially pension. But the universities didn't come to me. This guy came to me and said that the athlete, and oftentimes the African-American athlete, was ending up worse off after this process that theoretically was enabling than he started. And his future, more often than not, was severely harmed. So just to make it clear that, and by the way, Coach has told me stories in the past about how he invested in a young person to help them be socially fit. But you lose that opportunity if the child is changing. So I do think that Collis's mentorship of many has a perspective. And just to say what we are looking at, we cannot look at directly regulating wages. But Title IX is a big issue, and I think Congress should settle that. I don't think that the court should settle that, as an example. I'm sorry.
I was just going to make a comment and ask a question, right? So, Senator Murphy, I'm very, very intrigued with your sincere, earnest comments. Very intrigued. It's really important what the statements you made are critically important to the lifeblood of this process and the path we're taking in this process. So I'm intrigued that you would make these comments in front of this body. You're 1,000% accurate in the statements that you've made. Now, my question to Senator Tuberville, Senator Marshall, Senator Hickenlooper, and you, Senator Murphy, and Senator Cassidy. My question is, who's in charge? Who's in charge? Are the 100 men and women who sit at the highest level of the body in this country? Are you guys in charge? Are you in charge enough to make the ultimate decision? Or are these justices in charge? I'm just really curious as to know who's in charge, because a hard decision is going to have to be made, and it's going to dictate how things move forward in the lifeblood of higher education, which is the path that we want every young person to take, for the most part, unless you're an AI genius or some tech freak who has all this special talent. And of course, you know, when you talk about a tech freak, then you talk about LeBron, who's a basketball freak. And so I'm just curious as to know who's in charge. That's the real issue to solve the problem. We can talk about college athletics, and it's so critically important to so many people, both rural and urban, black, white, polka dot, pink, green, orange, everybody. It's important. So what are we gonna do to move forward and solve these two problems? Paying these guys. And that started in the 60s when a guy named, a basketball guy from Pennsylvania wanted to play in the NBA, and he was coming out of high school. And the NBA wouldn't let him play, so an organization I played for called the ABA allowed this guy to play. And of course, it got to a place where the NBA finally opened its doors to allow high school guys to come in and play. So, you know, where we are is trying to figure out.
Hang on, I'm gonna go to Coach, because Coach has a bill.
Yeah.
And he actually has the lived experience, and he's also taught me a lot.
Thank you, Ms. Temple. You hit it right on the nose.
Yeah.
This is not apples to apples. This is apples to oranges, what we're talking about here today.
That's right.
I watched that hearing last week, and it was good. There was a lot of good information. Some of the things weren't talked about enough that need to be talked about, but there's a lot of people in that room that cause this problem. And I didn't go because I knew there wouldn't be a lot that was accomplished. But you're exactly right. We got to distinguish whether we're an education institution or a minor sports. I did this 35 years. I watched kids become successful that never would have had a chance if they didn't go to college. Now, we're bringing those same kids, white and black kids, to athletic programs to make money for the school and make a little bit themselves. They're not graduating. Hell, they're not even going to class.
That's right.
It's a disaster.
That's right.
And that's what we've got to distinguish here. Are we going to be an education institution, or are we going to be pro sports? I had the PASS Act along with Joe Manchin. We worked on it for 3 years with coaches, athletic directors, commissioners. There's a lot of problems. But if we don't get back to the education part, it doesn't make any difference. We're going to ruin these kids that are making $400,000 or $500,000, and they get out and they look around, they can't get a job
Coach,
at Walmart.
can I ask you, what % of kids in college athletics play pro?
Less than 0.5% have a chance, and then less than that make it and never make any money out of it.
That's out of football and
special,
basketball only.
Yeah, it's a special crew, and I don't mind. I don't blame these kids coming in and say, I want part of the money. Here's what's happened. The NCAA was a disaster. For years, we told everybody, you have to start giving money from the university to the athletes. Not going outside and doing the collectives and recruiting off this money. It shouldn't be pay for play. If Auburn University is making $50 million, part of that money's got to go to the damn players.
That's right.
And we told them that, but no, they didn't want to do it. And I'm not saying Auburn, I'm saying the NCAA said we don't want a revenue share. And that's where it all started. And so if we would have revenue shared with these kids on all levels, we would have avoided this disaster. But it is a disaster that has no end in sight, and we're ruining these kids coming through today. Some of them are making millions of dollars, and hell, they're not even paying taxes on it. They don't even know how to pay taxes. It's ridiculous. And it's going to explode. And so what I'm saying is we're talking education or pro sports. And I was always for paying players because it is a full-time sport. Mr. Temple will tell you that. You don't have time to get a job.
That's right.
I mean, I worked the hell out of my kids because I lost, I got fired.
That's right.
And so they worked hard, and they were there to do that. They were there to go to class. But now we're wanting to give all these kids money. Fine, I'm fine with it. But give it from the colleges. They're making millions of dollars. Tell ESPN and ABC to pay more money to the universities, and the percentage would go up. Women's sports, I don't know how they're going to survive. I really don't, because they're going to turn into club sports because there's not going to be enough money to pay from the university.
Because Title IX requires the same number of scholarships for women's sports as for men, so it seems like football would dictate you get 105.
Scholarships. They're going to be able to pay scholarships, but they're going to cut back on scholarships. They're going to start dropping sports, okay, on both sides. They're going to start dropping men's golf just to have the same amount of athletes because of football and basketball that they're having to pay. I mean, they're going to find a way to get around it. But Mr. Temple said a very important part. We train our Olympic athletes in college. We don't have Olympic training. And so Olympic sports are going to start getting dropped. The solution is to the universities pay a percentage of their money. I was one of those coaches making a lot of money. I didn't make the money they're making today. Why do they make that much money? It is ridiculous to be paying $9, $10 million for coaches when a lot of that money could go to the players. It's exactly, I mean, they'll even tell you that. I mean, who would ever know? Who would ever known? I made almost $4 million one year. Hell, I never dreamed I'd make that much money. But it was the game.
Why does our guy get paid $13 million?
It's ridiculous.
$13 million. Why? I mean,
because he's offered that. What, you going to turn it down?
$13 million.
Because this is the problem we have here, and this is to your point, is that we have embedded a for-profit professional industry inside not-for-profit educational institutions.
And what has to be...
And this is a mess, right? It's a great mess because college football and college basketball and college tennis and soccer, it's fantastic, right? It's a great thing about this country. So it's a wonderful mess, but it's a mess. And I think it's hard to say that we're going to constrain the wages of anybody inside that system when it essentially is a professional sport. I mean, there is no functional difference between the highest level college football and basketball that's being played and professional basketball and football. In fact, the crowds are bigger. The talent is the same. And so I'm glad we're doing these hearings. It's a mess. I just want to make sure that we don't end up, I don't agree with the fact that a young athlete shouldn't make money because they don't know how to spend it. Like, that doesn't sound like a great argument to not provide somebody money that
I'm not saying that.
That you provide them what they're worth.
Yeah.
But That's why we're stuck here.
So please, as we endeavor to solve this problem, Senator, as you guys endeavor to solve this problem, okay, just bear in mind that the problem is going to grow and grow and grow, and when it really filters into secondary education people, the high schools, that's when it's really gonna be more and more of a problem. When we have to figure out how to manage the gambling problems that the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade student athletes are having to maneuver. And as it filters down to the middle school persons, I'm telling you, this deal is really out of control. It's gonna eat us up.
You hit another entire hearing on gambling. I spoke about that every day when I was coaching.
Yes,
because
sir.
It's even easier now. But I've got to go to another hearing, but I just want to say this. If I could do one thing, if I had a magic wand today, you could wipe out 80% of the problem by saying, when you start your clock, you got 5 years to pay 5. That's it. Don't come back wanting another year after that. And the second one is, you can transfer one time. I think you should be able to transfer. After that one time, if you want to transfer again, fine. But you set out a year like we used to.
You do the same thing for the coaches?
Pardon?
Same thing for the coaches? Transfer one time?
Yeah.
You got me, Chris. But this is a huge problem. It's not going to get any better until it's addressed. And the only one I think that can address it today is the guy in the Oval Office. If he would just put an executive order on 5 to play for 5 and one-time transfer. And this, see where it trickles down from there, because if you can't transfer, you can't negotiate for more money. I mean, and if you can't negotiate from the most money, we don't get to go back and negotiate after the first year.
I'm gonna differ with you a little bit, okay?
Go ahead.
Let's give them a little skin. Let's go 6. Let's go from 17 to 23. Or from
What do you mean 17 to 23?
17 years
Age.
old. 17 years old to 23 years old. Age limits. Age limits. 17 years old to 23. That's a 6-year run.
Yeah.
I mean, because
But
it's
the only way I would do that is I'd go back to the old academic rules. If you are not academically eligible and working toward your degree at a certain percentage each year,
no
you're
question.
done.
No question.
You got to go to class.
No
You got to
question.
learn something.
No question.
We're going to have a group of athletes that's not going to know how to read and write.
That's correct. That's
And
correct.
I'm talking about everybody that is not responsible for anything.
I agree. That's what that was the point I was making earlier when I said, you know, we're training a group of folk who are not going to be prepared to be responsible citizens.
Now, Coach, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit because executive orders will be overturned by the next president. If we do something in Congress,
Well, I know that.
that
but-
has permanence.
But here's what I'm saying, Senator. Try it for 2 years and just see where it goes. It would solve a tremendous amount of problems. But again, you got to get the universities back skin in the game and paying the players through their profits and not from profits outside as much. Now, name, image, and likeness, I want somebody to explain that to me. Because a judge says you can make money off your name, image, and likeness. So that means in the 10th grade, somebody can pay you name, image, and likeness, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely nuts.
Although LeBron could have made it when he was a senior in high school, right?
Yeah, yeah. But you can count on one hand in your lifetime how many people could do that, you know, at that young of age.
Right.
You know, maybe after the second year, then you go pro.
Now, let me ask, but tennis does that routinely, correct? A young lady will go, I see some young lady does really well as a 16-year-old even. Now, granted, she may not be in college. I guess now she could be, right? There are a lot of young tennis players who do really well with NIL, so to speak, correct?
I personally haven't seen many tennis men or women make as much money, obviously, as football or basketball from NIL.
No, but I mean, if they go pro, if they go to the Open, US Open, and do well, you see what I'm saying?
Typically, they're coming from college.
Got it?
Yeah, but again, international students play and they go right into the pros. So most of your American female and male college tennis players that are good enough to go pro will, but they go through college first.
Got it. Julie, you have been like, we've got a for-profit institution embedded within a nonprofit institution. And you've got a tension of the student athlete, but both Collis and Coach are saying increasingly that is giving short shrift to the student part of student athlete. You've got the unique perspective here. How would you address all that?
Well, obviously, there are complex circumstances. I don't know if you can take them one by one because they are interconnected. What I do think is absolutely critical, Senator, is that we provide an opportunity for some organization or some entity to clarify what the collegiate experience is and to recenter that around education. And I think our colleagues from the NAIA and from other parts of college sports would tell us that on a day-to-day basis, that is the experience. It gets lost in a lot of the debate, but the reality is we do have academic standards that are leading student athletes toward graduation. Up until the last few years, with so much mobility through the transfer portal in NCAA athletics, we've been very confident about our graduation outcomes because of those eligibility standards. They are literally built on a model that seeks graduation within 5 years. And so that concept matches nicely with a lot of what's been discussed. The issue is we don't have a governing organization that is able to enforce those rules on a consistent basis because of the evolution of the regulations and the judicial decisions and actions over the last several years. And so you have a convergence of several issues. Each would have been difficult issues to take on their own. Now they're layered together to create the quagmire that you hear people discussing. If you and your colleagues could support a limited antitrust exemption that would allow some entity to redefine this.
We can't do that here in this committee. I'll
Right,
just say that.
right, but would allow some entity to define the college experience, then you could come back to this discussion of employment and whether or not that is the model. It's difficult to do that under the current environment because the range of age of individuals and the range of experiences and what they are seeking out of that experience has grown so dramatically over the last few years. We have college athletes who are staying in college because they feel like there are better economic opportunities for them in college than there are in professional sports or even going out into the workforce. That is not what we were intended to do, sir. And so if that experience can be more clearly defined and enforced, then you have an opportunity to come back to the employment question and clarify that as it would be for all.
Jim, you've got the perspective of everybody at this table almost, because you're actually having to live it, but you're living it. You said 36% of your athletes, of your students are athletes. So it almost seemed like you could touch on every aspect of this.
Yeah, and I guess I would build first on what Julie was talking about and appreciate her mentioning the NAI. But I think this applies to Division II, Division III, even NJCA, and I would say many schools in Division I that are outside. You know, people can draw their lines wherever they want, Power 4, Top 100, whatever it might be. But the economics are so different at all of our schools, and only 4% of NAIA student athletes are getting the equivalent of a full scholarship or cost of attendance. So it's a partial scholarship structure. Division II has a very similar structure. Division III actually doesn't even give athletic scholarships. So I guess my word of caution, or I guess my request would be, as these important discussions are going on at the very highest levels of Division I, and whatever is decided there doesn't inadvertently or in a trickle-down way impact all the many great things that are still going on at all these other levels. Because
theoretically, though, if your budget is such that you don't have NIL dollars to distribute, or if the dollars are limited, that would almost solve your problem, correct?
Well, at the NAI, we have a lot of problems, but that's not really one of them. Our students, what NIL means to me, or what we did in the intercollegiate space, is we essentially removed all restrictions on what student athletes could do to go out and make money off their name, image, and likeness. So we put them on par with people who have musical talents, people who have other talents that they could go out and there's no other industry where you're restricting what individuals can do in the NIL space. But in athletics, because of the competition, and for good reasons, there were, at the time anyway, there were some restrictions. But at the NAIA, there's very limited NIL money that comes in.
So there's very little distribution money. It would be through a NIL type.
Well, students can go out on their own and do what I think were NIL deals that were the way it was intended to be, and that's third parties, external folks. But the way we talk about it at the NAIA, it's essentially pizza money. They're getting a few $100s, or maybe at the highest level, if they're really savvy with social media, a couple of $1,000. So it helps them to pay for the cost of education, but they're not getting rich by any means or going out and earning lots of dollars. And then our institutions get very little money from sponsorships, ticket sales, essentially no media deals. We do have some streaming deals that bring in a little bit of money. So our schools are funding athletics through net tuition revenue, through other ways that they can get some donations. But the model seems to be working pretty well for us right now, and that is that schools can attract students who otherwise wouldn't be there. They can do something they're passionate about. They can get a great education, and there's not the same tension in the system as you see at the very highest level. It is embedded in higher ed, and I guess that's my main point today is whatever is determined to be appropriate by the Senate and by Congress, to make sure that for all of those schools who are outside of the highest level of Division I, that our system that's working pretty well doesn't get disrupted because of that.
Thank y'all for being here. That was a nice way to end it. We want to avoid collateral damage as we attempt to address things in the Power 4, but keep into mind the Power 6. And if there's a take-home point I'm going to take here, is that as Coach said, 0.5% of these athletes will go on for a pro career. And so the initial impetus of this was Collis Temple telling me over breakfast at Louis, these athletes are being poorly served by the current system.
Correct.
Knowing that we should not restrict the dollars they can get from their NIL deal.
That's right.
And that historically they've been exploited. But someone flipped it, maybe Coach, that now we have a new form of exploitation. He actually made the point that now it's more about making money for the university than it was even before. So, Ms. Cromer, you said that there is a tension here. How are we going to figure that out? So I thank y'all for being here, and we're going to have a follow-up committee hearing. We're going to have a request for information going out. So please respond to that as well. And anybody who's watching, there'll be a request for information. But I'm going to finish by saying Congress needs to address this. And I think your point, is it going to be the 100 people here and the folks on the House side, or will it be the Supreme Court? And I actually trust the representative democracy, and I think that's the way we were set up to do. So thank you all for representing people in this representative process.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. Are you NAIA? Is Sanford NAIA?
NCAA.
NCAA?
NCAA mid-major.